Hey everybody, welcome back. We're on Unit 4, the financial sector. Okay, when we talk about Subunit 4.7, the loanable funds market. Okay, and this is part 1. And let me just say from the beginning, guys, if you like complexity, if you want to know everything about something, watch this video, this part 1. If you're like, hey, I just want it streamlined, I want the basics, I just want to know what I need to know, go ahead, you can skip past part 1, go right to part 2, okay? But for those that want to know it all, who want to understand the complexity, stay with me, okay? So that's what this video is all about. So let's get after it, okay? So first of all, I've got this FM right here, financial market, and I've also got underneath it the loanable funds market. I want you to know I often use these two terms interchangeably, so does macroeconomics, okay? Or at least 101 macro, use these interchangeably. However, the loanable funds market is actually a subset of the financial market. The financial market is actually bigger. Let's think about it this way, okay? You're a business, okay? You need financial capital. Where do you go if you need financial capital, i.e. money? You go to the financial market. That's what we're supposed to know, okay? So, you need money, you go to the financial market. There are two main ways for you to get money from the financial market. Number one, take out a loan. Hey, that's the loanable funds market. You're interacting in the loanable funds market. However, you can also sell some stock, okay? Sell equity in your business. Sell some ownership of your business. That is technically not part of the loanable funds market, but it is part of the financial market, okay? A way to get financial capital is to go to the financial markets and just sell some ownership in your business, okay? That one we're not going to be focusing on, okay? The rest of this video, I'm going to use these two terms interchangeably, even though we know the financial market is a little bit bigger than the loanable funds market. Next, who's interacting in the loanable funds market? Well, there are 5 macro aggregate actors. What are those 5 macro aggregate actors? Households, businesses, government, the rest of the world, and central banks. Now, depending who you talk to, 4 or 5 of those actors interact in this market. So what does that mean? It means everybody agrees 4 do. So let's talk about the 4 that everybody agrees with. Everybody agrees households interact with this market, okay? On net, households are what we call net savers. They are therefore suppliers of loanable funds. Households are suppliers of loanable funds. Everybody agrees with that. Now, that's a little bit confusing though. Why? Because households do borrow money. They do demand loanable funds. But once again, when we think on the net, when we aggregate all households together, if we look at all households together and we aggregate it all together, they are in fact net savers, okay? So they are suppliers of loanable funds. Now, who should we think that supply of loanable funds is primarily going to, okay? It is what I put on the other side. As you notice, I make savings really big and I make this other thing, business investment, big. I want you to have that link. That's our primary flow through the financial market. Household savings, funding, business investment. So businesses, for sure, demanders of loanable funds, okay? Suppliers, demanders. Why are businesses demanders of loanable fund? They need financial capital to go build a business or expand their business or improve their business, okay? So they need financial capital all the time. Next, we've got the government. They're going to be a little bit interesting, okay? They're going to be the main disagreement that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Some people see the government as an institution that can siphon savings away from its intended purpose, business investment. So some people who see it as siphoning savings away from business investment, they're going to say, hey, when government deficits increase, I'm going to shift the supply of loanable funds to the left. All right? That's one way to do it. We'll talk about that way. Others, and I'm actually in this second camp, okay? They just say, hey, government, what is government in general? Well, they run a lot of deficits, and when they run deficits, they need money, and people who need money, they demand loanable funds, and so they just handle government as a demander of loanable funds. Once again, I've got 2 graphs down here. I'm going to show you both ways of thinking about them, and you're going to find out that it doesn't matter as far as what's going to happen to the interest rate, and that's what most people very much care about when they ask you questions with this market. They want to know, such and such happens, what happens to the interest rate? No matter how or what school of thought that you go into, okay, what camp you go into, you'll get the right answer when it comes to the interest rate. Finally, we got the rest of the world, okay? They provide us with capital inflows. There's also some capital outflows. That's money going to the rest of the world. Capital inflows coming from the rest of the world. Capital outflows going to. Again, in this particular one, it's often good to just kind of combine those and just see this as something that affects the supply of loanable funds. In other words, if we get capital inflows, more capital inflows, that's augmenting household savings. That's increasing household savings. If you say, hey, there's an increase in capital outflows, hey, that means household savings is going abroad. It's not going to business investment, it's going abroad. That would be a decrease in household savings, okay? Hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, just watch that again, okay? I think it will eventually make sense to you. But before you do that, let's go ahead and take a look at the two different approaches to the loanable funds market that you generally see. Let's talk about the pure approach first, okay? The pure approach, the one I call the pure approach, okay? We got households, no matter what, suppliers of loanable funds, nobody disagrees, okay? Household savings, okay? So supply of loanable funds, household savings is part of that, okay? The only demander of loanable funds to this pure approach are business investment, okay? So the demand for loanable funds, hey, that is the investment demand curve. They're one and the same. That's a pure way to handle it. And here's how they handle these other two actors. Again, if that deficit gets bigger, that's going to siphon savings away from business investment. Supply of loanable funds goes left. Interest rate goes up. Deficit gets bigger. Supply of loanable funds goes left. Interest rate goes up. Rest of the world, already talked about this, guys. Capital inflows, an increase in capital inflows, augmenting savings, supply goes to the right. An increase in capital outflows, that means savings is being siphoned away from business investment, supply goes to the left. Just find out what's happening to the real interest rate. I think that's probably your most pure approach to the model. However, it's not the approach I use, okay? The approach I use goes like this. It's pretty much the same. The only difference is on the government standpoint, okay? Supply of loanable funds, households. Once again, everybody agrees with that. Household savings, that's your number one supplier of loanable fund. Number one demander of loanable funds, business investment. Everybody agrees, business investment, demand for loanable fund. However, government, once again, some people, like myself, say, hey, look, government runs a deficit. They need money, they go to the financial market and demand loanable funds. And that's what they're doing. They are demanding loanable funds. So let's show them demanding loanable funds. And so, when they demand a loanable fund, we will shift the demand for loanable funds to the right. In other words, let me not confuse you. Let's say the deficit gets bigger. Government deficits get bigger. They're going to have to demand more loanable funds. That increase in demand for loanable funds, shift it to the right. And guess what? What's happening to the interest rate? It's going up. Both models. Deficit gets bigger, interest rate goes up. Government deficit gets bigger, interest rate goes up. Either you shift the supply of loanable funds left or the demand to the right. Both situations, interest rate goes up, and that's what's important that you know. That's the number one thing that you know as far as government deficits is what it does to the interest rate. All right? And then as far as this goes, this is why I don't call it the pure approach, is I handle this the way that this graph handles this, okay? Increase in capital inflows, hey, that's augmenting household savings, shift supply to the right. Hey, capital outflow, you get a capital outflow, okay, we can handle that. That's savings going abroad, shift the supply of loanable funds to the left, okay? There we go. Those are our four major actors interacting with the market. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say, but not everything. All right, we got one last little piece of complexity. There's that fifth macro aggregate actor. What is that fifth macro aggregate actor? It is the central bank. Now, a lot of economists do not want to show the central bank affecting the loanable funds market, and that's fine. It's, once again, a fairly pure thing to do. Okay, here's the reason. If you go back to my video on interest rates and bond prices, okay, at the beginning of Unit 4, that video is going to tell you that the central bank does not really interact in the loanable funds market, this primary market where borrowers and lenders go. They go to this other market called the secondary bond market. The central bank acts in this other market called the secondary bond market, not in the loanable funds market. So, pure economists say, don't even show them messing with the loanable funds market. If you want to know the impact of the central bank's actions on the interest rate, go to the money market, which is another video that's coming out, okay? So, that's one school of thought. Me, I'm not as pure about it. I don't mind showing the central bank interacting with the loanable funds market. Here's what I like to say. This market right here, I like to kind of think of the intermediary, the financial intermediaries being banks. So I'll often just say, hey, that market right there, that's banks. And if the Fed wants to increase the money supply, what is the Fed going to do? They're going to push what's called reserves, which is just money, into banks, okay? Increasing the supply of loanable funds in banks, okay? So easy Monetary policy, that's a situation where the central bank wants to put money into banks. I don't mind it shifting the supply of loanable funds to the right and decreasing the real interest rate. Once again, not the purest thing to do, but it doesn't bother me because the big thing that kids need to know is when the Fed increases the money supply, interest rates are supposed to go down. And if the Fed ever wants to cool the economy down, wants to siphon money out of the financial market, pull money out of banks, okay, if they want to do that, they're going to decrease the supply of loanable funds, shift it to the left, interest rate goes up. Anyhow, that's a lot of complexity. I hope it made some sense. It'll be more streamlined in part 2. We'll see you in part 2. Thank you.